Yokohama. And I actually came to the university majoring in English, this university where I am now. At that time, I was actually, this was the first time that I had a teacher of English who is categorized as native speaker. And native speakers are mostly responsible for conversation or spoken language classes. Oh, I thought, oh, now this is a university, so this is different from secondary school. That I have a so-called native speaker teachers, and I've been telling my secondary school, the colleagues, say, well, in my university, we have native speakers. I'm very proud that I can learn English from the native speakers. And also the professors constantly use the native speakers, proper pronunciation. You have to become able to communicate with native speakers. Okay. Then native speaker competence was set as a goal in general, but it was something. So, okay, you have to practice your English to become like a native speaker. Okay. Getting as close as possible to the native speaker, but because you are non-native speakers, you would never achieve the goal. So the matter is that how close you are with the native speakers. So this is something I've been repeatedly instructed by the teachers. So as a conclusion training, okay, now I do my best effort to improve my English, but knowing that teacher also says that you can never become a native speaker. So where's the goal? So there's a big confusion. So I think, one of the best ways, and I was fortunate that I was able to have an opportunity to go to the United States to get MA program in TESOL. And so I think studying in so-called English-speaking country was a solution. I went there. So I went to two institutions. First, the St. Michael's College in Vermont, and was a more teacher training institution. And I was a very happy time, although there are, now I can recall it, there are some at that time, those methodology books, for example, and some of the techniques are pretty much, Euro, US centered, those so-called English-speaking country centered, but I was not really feeling very well. I thought it was really natural because you want to become a native English teacher, and therefore, you have to learn from them. But then when I decided to continue and going to Georgetown University, as it was a very prestigious university at the time, it was a huge linguistic department to do my PhD. And it was the first time I realized I had a very negative feeling about, okay, what I'm doing. Am I a kind of slave of native speakers? That kind of things. Those native speakerism is everywhere. Like, for example, in a casual conversation among my linguistic colleagues, say, oh, she's an intelligent student because she doesn't have an accent. One time, which was, I think I know my colleague has been hearing this episode thousands of times, but maybe this is the first time to share this to the Vancouver students, so bear with me. Okay. There was one seminar course in the PhD, early part of PhD. In the United States, you have to take courses. And a professor, who is an American professor, who is a very, very famous professor, I don't name him. And he serves as the executive board of the International TESOL, and also very well-respected scholar. And there are a lot of students from Asia, as well as the other foreign students, but mostly it was a time like 1980s. There are students from Asia, like China, Taiwan, Korea, Japan, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, and there are all of us. And then one time,
Ito efficiency gaya. Mandiri lebih lucu ya, Mbak. Mereka potongannya banyak. Sekali mereka telat, jam
Can you hear me?
potongan mereka. Oh, aku.
Can you
Nanti lembut potongan
please
dipotong pulau.
mute the sound?
Efisiensian. BUMN.
Okay.
Okay.
One time there, in the beginning of the semester, this professor was talking about, okay, some of the international students may not be familiar with in the U.S. institutions, we expect you to participate in the class very actively. So don't hesitate to ask questions, something like that. So I try to make myself good to the professors. I try to make it a rule to ask questions in every time. So, but one time, these things happened. I was going to clarify what I had learned in the previous week. It was a very simple question I asked to the professor. So I need to clarify what's the difference between A and B. My understanding is this. Can you clarify that? That kind of simple question. I don't remember what exactly it was. It looks like the professor was in a very, very bad mood. And this professor said, huh? Excuse me? Again? Say it again? And I said the same question. It's very, very simple sentence. Say, oh, can some native speaker rephrase what Masaki Oda is trying to say? Okay. Now, this was a class mixed with the upper class undergraduate student, MS student, and my case, it was a very, very last semester of coursework in a PhD program. I was so embarrassed. And then this younger student reacted, oh, I don't understand. Not necessarily because that this student didn't understand me because of my accent, but maybe they do not have a background. However, it was a very strange atmosphere. And then all of a sudden, from that day, people just started to see me as I'm very incompetent English speaker. And then there are a lot of things like that happened in that department. And there was one time there was a PhD qualifying exam of applied linguistics. And I'm very glad, well, I know that Georgetown people will hate it, but I'm very glad because this was made to public. So I kept this question of a PhD qualifying exam on 1987. There were 4 questions and I have to answer. This is an essay question. And the first question was like, this is exactly like this. Transcribe, this is supposedly, okay, this is not the English linguistic question. This is the applied linguistic question. And the question number 1, transcribe the utterance below in IPA, those phonetic symbols. Okay, this is okay, because I think this professor is trying to maybe figure out whether this candidate has an ability to understand, transcribe in the IPA symbols. So again, this is 1980s. So there's no computer, there's no speech recognition, etc. there. So you have to manually hear that. Maybe you have a cassette tape and you have to write down the phonetic symbols. But the second part, okay, utterance below in the IPA symbols as a native speaker of standard English would pronounce, okay, would pronounce, which means the professional, I mean, you are not native speaker. I don't know what a native speaker of standard English would pronounce and what's standard English anyway. I'm sure I have my British colleague had trouble with this question. But then discuss a phonological process. This is once you transcribe, okay, this sentence is not presented in the audio form. You just imagine in your head that how native speaker would pronounce and you write down the transcript and you say, okay, this is the like regressive assimilation. This is vowel reduction or something, which is fine. Then there was a question, like we went to Denver airport to see are friends of, maybe friends of, or like airport two T's there. So you have then two dentals there. So maybe the one is dropped, something like that. So these are, but actually I failed this question because then I kind of protested that. I don't think this is a good question because it is very unfair. This is not English language test. This should be the linguistics text, and you are trying to find out. But then say, well, you have to know how native speaker would speak, something like that. So this is a very traumatic experience. Maybe it's a small thing for the other students, but it was a very traumatic experience. It was the beginning. Okay, a couple of years later, I got the assistantship of teaching Japanese. So again, but actually, native speaker has been a kind of magic word. So actually, I myself have to confess, because I was teaching Japanese, and I am a native speaker. I also have to confess that I abused my privilege as a native speaker. So when I teach Japanese, there was a sentences in Japanese, like there are sentences with the different particles, yama ni noboru and yama o noboru, and which I don't go into detail. And actually, so-called native speaker Japanese, or maybe myself, clearly distinguish these two sentences. That's one, but one is like, for example, you go to go climb the mountain. The one is where the destination is important. Then other is where the process is important, and we distinguish. Then there was a question from the student, and I actually didn't know, I wasn't able to explain the difference, although I clearly think that these are two different sentences. So my answer to the student as a beginning teacher was, oh, we don't say it. Native speaker don't say it. Now, this is the things I still regret I had to do it. Because I've been protesting against the English teacher doing the same thing, but I, as a native speaker of Japanese, who did it. So this is something native speakers fight back. But and when I go back to Japan, there was another thing. Maybe about 10 years later, when I back in Tamagawa, I was the academic coordinator of a department. And there are English courses, and then there are 3 sections. So students register 3 sections that, and I need to balance 3 classes. There's one teacher who is ethnic Korean, is a native speaker of Korean, and who had a MA and maybe I think PhD, doing PhD or maybe MA in the Cambridge, England, in applied linguistics. And I'm sure that she is a very, very professional, and I had a wonderful talk with her, very respected. And another one, a second one, myself. So I don't have to explain what myself is. Third one, because of the shortage of teachers, because there are many students who want to take this English conversation course, we added third section, somebody who, a native speaker American, and was still doing master's, but the undergraduate degree was computer science. And by the way, this Korean lady was able to speak Japanese very fluently as well as Korean, multilingual. And this younger teacher. What happened was, out of 80 students, 60 students wanted this younger teacher's class. Maybe age, but at that time I was young as well, okay? But then this, say, Miss Kim, and was an excellent teacher, only 3. And so I tried to convince students to move to that section. Say, well, I want a native speaker. We have a right to receive classes because you are paying a high tuition. Native speaker, well, she's very experienced. No, she has an accent. Then, so I think I have to brutally say, okay, are you coming to my class or her class? And then maybe I was able to move 20 students to Miss Kim's class. But anyway, that kind of things. So, but again, this was not, maybe I can blame students, but maybe this is, I was very interested in the public discourse. Why this native speaker was so valued there. So, and also there's a tendency, now this affects very much with when I started with my colleagues here with the Center for English and Lingua Franca, there was a prevailing division between so-called native speaker group and Japanese. It is like comparing apples with oranges. So what happens, for example, Indonesian teachers, experienced teachers, who is qualified to teach English, which group are they, etc. So that was a reality, but this is maybe still prevailed in some of the quarters of English language education in the Japanese college. Now here's what I'm doing, and I was very fortunate. Now I have two more years to go for the retirement, but I was the CUIP is the international center program, and also this my highlights of my career was 2014 to 19, the director of Center for English and Lingua Franca. And then since then, I changed 3 positions, and then graduate school, Dean Graduate School, and College of Humanity, and now the executive director. And I'm working on the organizations there. So I'm still in contact with the academic organizations. So I was very fortunate. I have a lot of friends. For example, the TEFRIN in Indonesia. I've been in contact with the people. That's why I knew Safneo. And also, I've been speaker of the conference in Indonesia and as well as the neighboring country there. Okay, now, so much for my autobiography. And I will talk about the kind of history of native speakers as a concept in ELT. So native speaker has been used as a benchmark in teaching, learning, material development, as well as hiring practices. Alan Davis, his book on the native speakers in 203, in the very, very beginning, introductory part, he says that the concept of native speaker is surely a common sense idea, common sense, referring to people who have a special control, supposedly, over language, insider knowledge about the language. They are the models, which I talked about. We appeal to the truth about the language. They know everything. They know what the language is. Yes, we can say it. No, you cannot say it. And what the language isn't. No, that's not English. That's not Japanese. That's not Indonesian. They are the stakeholder of the language. They control its maintenance, shape its direction. Now, this goes with what is called the communicative language teaching. Now, communicative teach, I don't know about Indonesia, but communicative language teaching is still a kind of good metaphor for the, I would say, the teaching methodology courses. So it is often treated as a very positive method of language teaching in contrast with so-called grammar translation. Communicative language teaching, which emphasizes communicative competence and communication, but it also strongly relates to the native speakers because that who decides that the particular utterance is communicative or not. So this is still a question. Nobody can answer that question. This issue of native speaker, which has been highlighted by many scholars, but in 1992, well, it's already more than 30 years, when Robert Phillipson, my old friend, who had been a British Council officer in the Africa, now he's in Denmark now, and he published a very landmark book called Linguistic Imperialism by the Oxford University Press. At the time, there's one section, he talks about how Britain and British Council promoted English language teaching in the way that they wanted. And he kind of listed an example of the Commonwealth Conference on the teaching of English as a second language held at Mekerere, Uganda in 1961, which was before I was born, because I was born in 1962. And so it's been 30 years between this conference and Philipson's publication. And at the time, he had been saying, he was saying in 1992, we've been talking about this for 30 years. Okay, go through this. In this conference, there was a 5 key tenet of English language teaching, which was kind of, declared there. English is the best taught monolingually. The ideal teacher of English is the native speaker. The earlier English is taught, the better the results. The more English is taught, the better the results. And if other languages are used much, standard English will drop. Isn't that something familiar now? Because this had already been 30 years at the time of Philipson's publication, but now 30 years since then, we've been talking, most of them, for more than 60 years. Okay, now, but that affects the policy of language teaching. So actually, this triangle, you have this policy makers make a policy, so teachers have to follow the policy, and general public react. But again, it is very, very interesting that Tobescu Dabkangas, that Philipson, who passed away last year, a great scholar, and who's been talking about the linguistic human right. And there's a framework of so-called linguicism, the racism, because of the language. And she, in her publications, was saying that there is also always A team, which is the dominant group, and B team, and the dominated group. So, like, for example, in some society, the dominated native speaker, non-native speakers. In some country, the male, female, rich and poor. Rich may be rich in money, rich in resources, rich in education, as well as the poor. So A team has advantage and influence over the B team, and maybe there's a C team, D team there. But when you talk about the minority languages, I think this framework is very, very useful. What is happening is when policymaker who's a power put the policy and affect the teachers, and then teacher is a stronger position to educate the general public. General public are not given enough option to select. And also, Van Dyke also said in his book on the access theory, saying like those with power, control is like what Kangas called B team with access to the resources. So basically, you are given one option, and you don't even know what the other option is. For example, in the case of Japan, English not a required subject in secondary school. Believe me, this English is not a required subject. It is foreign language which is required, but in the case of a junior high school, the 7th and 8th and 9th grade, 97% of the Japanese lower secondary schools offers English as the only foreign language. And I haven't got the exact citation, but I've seen some of the articles talking about this, and very few people, if any, few teachers realize there's even the option other than language. So teaching other language is legal. Teaching Bahasa Indonesia is legal. And also teaching maybe any of the languages legal. As you use the government authorized textbook. Now, this is another commercialism going on because the publishers are not interested in doing it because you cannot make money. So that's why English is also the very marketable now. And it's been, this is the kind of problem. Children, in the context of a political discourse, will say secrecy, which means don't give enough information so that they are not aware of it. The strategy of preventing people receiving information. So, again, in the case of Japan and many places, even those who are in the English language, teaching professional, teacher trainers, some of them believe that English is the foreign language that you have to learn, you have taught, and it's the international language. But, I think some of you have heard about this word Englishes, people's changing people's attitude toward the Englishes. So when I was a graduate student in the United States, it was a time that the emergence of the word Englishes. Like, for example, English, Braj Kachur's 3 concentric circles, which many of you may be familiar. At the time that he said he distinguishes like 3 groups: English as a native language group, so-called English-speaking countries, English as secondary language. English is not the native language of the people there, but English is used as a common language of the kind of international languages like Philippines, Nigeria, Singapore, etc. And English is a foreign language, like most of the parts in Indonesia, Japan, and Thailand, China, etc. But again, if you say what the Japanese, what the Chinese, that's another story. And at that time, so there was a group of people, like 1999, in the International TIS organization, there was a code, what they call caucus group called non-native English-speaking teachers, which is well reported by George Brain's book, who is from Sri Lanka and who had been in Hong Kong for a long time. And he actually started the NNEST caucus, which I was the chair in 2004. But actually, I felt very, very hesitant about using this name because this is like native and non-native. It's kind of binary distinction. And the language is a more, I would say, fluid. You can move around and you cannot really distinguish a line between the language A and language B. But because of this, people try to resist. So in a way, you are a native speaker, and many of the proponents of NNEST movement were actually trying to gain recognition of, but still it's based on native, non-native binary distinction. So this is more like a resistance. Non-native speaker. Then like somebody like Mejias, for example, who is from Hungary. Okay, now this is harmonious. And I mean, I like this peaceful idea. Both groups of teachers serve equally useful purpose in their own ways. In an ideal school, there should be a good balance of native speakers, non-native speakers, who complement each other in their strengths and weakness. Well, strengths and weakness. But I still felt very, very hesitant about it. Now, here's what I said. Look young, relevant. 2008. I'm sure it's still there. There was an interview. But I was the NNEST caucus member at the time. And this was an interview. And my friend Ana Wu, who was from Brazil and who passed away a few years ago. And here, it is the first time I publicly questions the distinction, this binary distinction. For example, so I clearly state that in the world of English language teaching, the different distinction between NES native English teachers and non-native speakers.
This meaning scenery.
All right.
Halo Pak Safrizal. Please mute.
Native speakers
go on.
and non-native speakers are useless. And because I think many Asian countries, if you look at the job posting there, and you see like a native speaker wanted. We wanted teachers who who has native like proficiency, native speakers only, and usually get a higher salary. But actually, maybe many native speakers are likely have experience as a language users. But there are a lot of so-called non-native speakers. Non-native speakers are not necessarily less experienced in language teaching and training. So institutions should prioritize the teachers' own qualification as a kind of teaching credentials or experience, or maybe how many languages that they have learned and experienced there, rather than just labeling a native speaker or non-native speaker. Like you remember by my earlier example with the younger teacher as well as experienced teachers, and somebody looks very Oriental, automatically the student automatically perceives as, oh, she has an accent. Therefore, negative consequences. So we're going back to now, this is the main point. And I can do the lot about it. Those are the group from Benkuru University students who came in with Safneo in 2019. Remember this war. This is a quotation from this is the and I took the Henry Wilson in Vienna, who wrote an article in the ownership of English, which is a very critical article in 1994. And I remember actually when he was talking this in Baltimore, and so many audience, American audience actually. I shouldn't say the American, but he actually said it, and stood up and walked out. And this is actually in the TESOL Quarterly. So if you're interested in just go to the TESOL Quarterly in 1994, and this article is still give you some things to think about. And I asked Henry, what the part that you want to? And he actually I chose this myself. And it's kind of coincidental, it matches. Real proficiency is when you are able to take possession of the language, tie it to your advantage, and make it real for you. So what is the reality for students? So this was the kind of philosophy of English as a lingua franca. So talking about native speaker oriented English as well as world English. I'm not saying anything negative about world English. I respect Braj Kachru. I respected at the time, unless Braj Kachru had proposed this importance of varieties of English, recognizing variety of English, this ELF or maybe other concept had not appeared. But I feel very, very sad some of the so-called ELF scholars and complaining Braj Kachru, just say, oh, this is out of date. So you really have to know how this kind of ideology have been developed and contributing to the English language teaching and applied linguistics. So here's, actually, there are a lot of models here because it's a simplified version. Because I have a graduate version, an undergraduate version, PhD version there. But this is something, I use this for the general audience. So it used to be English native speaker model, so teaching and also teacher training are aimed at the native speakers model. And then what the English is, so NES, dichotomies still exist. recognizing the variety, but dichotomies to exist therefore, and also people tend to say like geographically based distinction, categorization, Japanese English, Indonesian English. Besides, you were talking about the Indonesian languages. It's more diverse. And also, so pretty much what we came out as a kind of umbrella term is English as an international language. Any use of English among speakers of different first languages, including so-called native English speaker, and for whom English is a communicative medium of choice and of the only option. The Zeidelhofer 2011. It's already many years, but this is a kind of basic. And these models, different transitional models, had affected how the institution developed the programs, materials, teacher training, and hiring teachers. And actually, Tamagawa University chose ELF. So again, going back to the policymakers triangle, reverse triangle. And this was Gunther was talking about the, this is, I would say, the social practice. I say believing that native speaker is good and believing that English is the only choice, etc. That's become very institutionalized. And it was a systematically organized set of statements which gave expression to the meaning of value of institutions. And also say like policymakers say, give a legitimate as why they came up with the policy. Usually in the case of Japan, I don't know about the case of Indonesia, that policymakers say, okay, because of we hear a lot about from a general public. So in response to the general public demand, we came up with this policy. We cannot make everybody happy there. But the general public, as I said, had not been given sufficient information to think about, neither the sufficient information to choose from. And then policymakers, then teachers has to follow this policy. Okay, so now that goes with what called the legitimatization of discourses, which was actually well explained in Van Leeuwen's book on discourse. The consistent reinforcement of discourse with the repeated legitimation process. Now, how this is the English language teaching and maybe foreign language teaching policy is going different countries. And particularly, what is categorized as rationalization, legitimation by reference to the goals and use as institutionalized social action and to knowledge society has constructed to endow them with cognitive validity. So it's, in a very, very short time, it's been there. Like, for example, the foreign language is a subject, but everybody believes in English. And now we are facing it is too late to expand because we assume that English is as if English is the foreign language. So no one, but this institutionalized process, no one can explain how and why social action has been institutionalized in the first place. And I usually cite this Duberg, the Danish political scientist, in his talk book on political science, say when agents can influence each other and be influenced without knowing it, it becomes problematic to view influence in a causal term. This is so because the intention behind the effect cannot be identified with that which is required to establish a causal relation. So, where are we going? I'm sure that you are already overloaded with the information. But maybe my purpose of giving this lecture was try to think about, try to maybe give some idea to start thinking about, especially the younger generation, go to which direction that we should go with teaching English and other foreign language. First, like world English paradigm and English paradigm. I think discussion is going on in the Tamagawa University chose this ELF paradigm seems to be reasonable, but we have to have a consistent review. In what's going on, world development in the linguistics as well as education and also political atmosphere. But it is important not to think about like, everything is like as if it is like all or nothing one. Okay. So constant reflection is important. And also, I was thinking about, especially maybe it's related to the theme of this talk today. We are in the English as a foreign language situation. Although some ELF scholars prefer not to use this. But maybe I think in order to talk with those who have been familiar with EFL, which means that English is in the context that English is not necessarily used as a native or second language. But this doesn't mean, like I said in 2007 article, as well as maybe 1990s, Aristopanik was talking about. There are a lot of Englishes in the world, and as Braj Kacho said, but that doesn't mean we are in the world in English. Don't put ourselves in the world in English. You have to really caution this. And also, Kanagaraja was saying the translingual practice, and we're talking about translingualism and trans something. Li Wei was talking about. Of course, definition may be important, but we need to realize this. I took from Charles Kanagaraja's statement. We are dealing with language resources that are mobile, fluid, and hybrid. And also that, for example, multilingual societies in Asia, and also in the case of Indonesia, I really, it's fascinating, for example, when you go to Bengkulu, and I think the Safri once told me about your local language, and maybe I think you have a Sumatra, different from Java, Western Java, etc. And you have Bahasa Indonesia, etc. And many Japanese believe that everybody, the first language in Indonesia's first language is Bahasa Indonesia, and which I believe it's not true. But it is also good. You can take advantage of different linguistics and cultural resources you have, and so that you just add English as one of the repertoire it's a parallel to the many of the languages and the varieties that you have, rather than making English or any other language as a special. So I'm really question of dichotomy, all or nothing things. So Irani Tupas, who is from Philippines, who is in London right now, he was saying that while much rigorous linguistic and social linguistic work for the first 20, 30 years has indeed legitimized the plurality of Englishes and Englishes, a variety of English depending on one's frame of understanding. I like it. The question has shifted to their use in the formal context and education. So actually, now people are talking about definition. It's nice when you give this kind of lecture, you have to categorize, you have to give terminology. But yet, it is not, it is not relevant. You just talk about which framework is good, which one not. You really have to deal with how we're going to do with students, how we're going to do developing teachers, etc. So the concluding, so that I can give you about half an hour for the question and answer. Going back to this yellow wall that we have in the Center for English as a Lingua Franca, what is real proficiency? You cannot make, you're not supposed to, could you turn off your microphone? I would appreciate it if you could mute the microphone.
Rancia, please mute. Matikan. Yeah. Oh, Debbie, please.
Yeah, I'm sorry because I cannot hear my voice.
Yeah. Nurasia, yeah. matikan audionya ya.
Okay, sorry. Real proficiency. Real proficiency, you cannot use, you are not supposed to define real proficiency, but maybe you have a student in front of you, you have a teaching situation. So what you consider the real proficiency that you want your student to achieve? Or maybe one based on the needs of students, based on the needs of community. So actually go back to that yellow wall, that what Widdowson stated. Real proficiency when you possess the language and turn it to your advantage, make it real for you. So it has to be real for each student. Okay, what are the role of ELT professional? What are the role of private linguist? You remember the policy makers. Yes, maybe policy makers are established for they are the expert for the policies, but you really have to constantly disseminate information to the general public and as well as the policy makers. So I've been talking about the importance of transdisciplinarity, like English language teaching, applied linguistics communicate with, for example, psychologists, sociologists, but it's also the time you hear about how the academics, any of the academics, including those in English language teaching and applied linguists, to explain and provide information, because I see a lot of applied linguistics article. I have to review it. It's a wonderful, well-designed, very scientific article, and a lot of numbers. And this is the significant. Okay, this is rejected hypothesis. This is significant. But you really have to explain, digest this, make it as accessible as possible to the stakeholders. So maybe I think you are very good at statistics. You know what this significance, level of significance mean. But how does affect the classroom? How would you explain this to those who are writing thesis, for example? This is something you have to keep in mind. And again, except for the cases of the Phillips mentioned about those fallacies, which had not been changed for 60 years, everything is changing. So sometimes if you go review things and diachronically, historically, and so you see why this idea appeared. And in the meantime, constant reflection. Like I've been trained as a teacher 30 years ago. I tried my best effort to update my knowledge, but you need to do much effort for that. I'm sure I'm not doing enough. I'm sorry. So ELT professional need to depart from this dichotomy, native English speakers, non-native English speakers dichotomy in order to focus on the real need of students and constantly asking yourself what the real need of students. Like collaboration is necessary. I would just try to skip it, but there are new things like Kanagawa 2022 or Baker Ishikawa talking about the more, they are trying to approach more in the classroom. And also this approach to midterm to long term. When you have to make a plan, you have to think about the midterm, long term perspective, and also collaborative reflection, individual experience. Individual experience is very, very important, but you really have to put that together. And also, if you have multiple resources, take them as an advantage. You have to be very proud of that you know many languages. Yeah, unlike Donald Trump. So I hope I was able to give some idea to be thinking about it. And thanks very much. And I would be happy to respond to your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Masaki Oda. Okay, now we come to Q&A, question and answer time. Is there any question? Okay, question from Risnawati in the chat box. How do teachers address issues of linguistic diversity and accent variation in EFL classroom? Number two, what strategies can be used to promote a more ELF inclusive approach in EFL context? Okay, back to you,
Okay,
Masaki.
let me respond. Thank you very much for the questions. Yeah, this is actually, yeah, I don't know. But things like, let's do the number one.
Yeah.
This is actually in my conclusion part. I was addressing this. First of all, if you consider yourself as a researchers need to make their research accessible. Accessible means, you cannot, yes, and if you are in a professional conference, a graduate school, you can use your terminology, you can talk about this concept. But when you try to talk this to like somebody who have no knowledge about the English language and linguistics, I think we need to learn this. For example, if you're talking about like all of a sudden, okay, I'm a pro ELF, but what is ELF? Now you really have to take a step to explain, different ideas like I did. Even my needs not necessarily enough, but then you have to have, okay, you have a particular case of your particular situation, how this applies to that. Well, so maybe that's why I said personal experience is important. When you talk about accent, if you say accent, it used to be, I think there's a prevalence of accent was something negative. Everybody has an accent. Everybody has an accent. This is some perceived as what they call standard in a particular very limited situation, some are not. I think, the notion of English as a lingua franca, especially early notion of English as a lingua franca is first. Like, in the 1980s, you have those pronunciation textbook and say you have to do the minimal pair something, and you have to try to imitate so-called native speakers model, not even knowing that how you categorize. This happens to be a native speaker or a variation of American English, something like that. For example, if I all of a sudden, because I talk with Safneo English, if I all of a sudden try to imitate Midwest American and Safneo try to talk about Australian English and strictly follow, that's a disaster. But we don't really say, we say the English as common, so it naturally occurs, and we are in the process, we can adjust. Not necessarily because of accent. So, but accent is not just pronunciation. So you have all the whole context, and as first you can get this done, and then so this is a long process. So I would say linguistic diversity is there. So there's no standard. Diversity is there. And when you talk about, maybe you may talk about, if you're talking about a particular domain, as far as you can get the meaning across, this is the first step. But eventually you will try to adjust using your experience and using the various resources from other languages. So in the classroom, I think teacher, student say something and teacher didn't understand. And don't just say you don't understand, but try to figure out in the context of what he or she wants to say and try to make a best solution. But don't blame that, don't like pinpoint, okay, this maybe you have a bad pronunciation, do the pronunciation practice or something like that. So that kind of thing. And also it's very difficult to define variation there. So, and second one, to promote my, okay, this is, I think, I can ask Paul or Bill to this, but we usually say you cannot define this ELF either. But I would say our approach, which we've been doing with the Center for English Lingua Franca, is first of all, we have to have students and teachers aware of the variety of Englishes and how English is used, what they call ELF aware pedagogy, which my colleague as herself has a lot of publications. And you should visit the website, the Tamagawa site, so that we have a lot of self-forum, which is a online journals that you can download. A lot of practice in the context. But awareness, the one of the popular way I usually explain is there was a book, I think article by Yasmin Berat from Turkey and Xhakis from Greece, and who wrote in the context of teacher training. There was you have to have a awareness. First, you have to have exposed to the different variety of English, teachers and students. Make them exposed as many as possible. Variety as possible, and then ask them to critically reflect it in order to read to how they, individual runners and maybe teachers, deal with the teacher situation. So this is not something you can automatically bring it to the classroom, but this near process. That's why I said that long term, short term there. Awareness, critical awareness before going into action. I hope I answered question. At least I have shown the direction.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. More question? Okay, Prof. Masaki, I look at Google, the advantages or strengths of native speaker English teachers are fluency, pronunciation, and culture. And the advantages or strengths of non-native speakers understanding, motivation, explanation, and empathy. Now, can we conclude that we non-native speaker teachers do not focus on teaching speaking or daily conversation because it is related to the culture? So we should focus on academic English, on writing, on reading, and so on. What do you think?
I think this goes with the academic writing things, the supplemental specialty. And but there are two things. The first thing is that the Google definition you read, I kind of don't agree with that good definition of a native speaker. Native speaker has an advantage of culture. Everybody has an advantage of culture. Like if I happen to use English as a tentative lingua franca and talking with my colleagues in Bengkulu and try to get the information about Bengkulu, history, culture, something. Do we still need to ask the native speaker of English? I said better just ask friends here and about But anyway, so that is a so-called institutional discourse, the binary discourse. You have the native speaker group. But when you talk about ELF, first, the distinction is not valid. I mean, we cannot really divide because more on the individual things. Now, going to the needs, yes, I think, like, for example, academic writing, no matter whether you use English or not, let's start with this. Like, you have to write something, academic writing, and maybe publish a paper. You choose the right journal, and maybe you have a journal A, journal B, journal C, or something like that. And then you have to have, okay, how would you write your manuscript? Then you choose, okay, now this one may be Japanese, this one may be English there. Okay, and if you go to the journal, you usually read those journals. So this one has a special font, you have all the format, something. So maybe like in the academic writing or like APM or something, there are some conventions that exist in a particular journal. But don't assume that this is because of English. because I think in the 1960s, the Robert Kaplan studies, and I think my friend Ryuko Kubota criticized very, very much, was actually, those American discourse is like a linear, and Japanese going around. And the Japanese are not logical. Maybe logical in the English sense, but maybe we are perfectly okay. If you are writing journals in Japanese, you are expected to do so, that rhetoric things. The same thing is like the previous study in the Safnir study, actually. The Indonesian scholars writing something for the Australian journal, for example, that kind of thing. That maybe, if your audience, you may have to adjust this. But say if you are writing maybe journals published in English, but pretty much primarily for the Indonesian audience, you may have different convention. Because I would say, I often review the Teflon journals. And that is actually, I've been talking with the editors, and then I learned a lot. And also I refer to a lot of things from Safnir's study about writing, so it's very helpful. But my approach is, as a reviewer, different from I'm reading from, like, for example, I'm reading from like other US-based journal, which is called International, whereas Teflon more, I would say, Indonesia or maybe Asia-oriented something. So it's depending on topic. So as a writer and maybe as a teacher, and then you really have to gain your kind of repertoire, not just which language as a code, but this convention, even in Japanese. So I would say one of the way of thinking some of the published writer, some of the authors said about the domain. So you have to think about, if you are writing in the academic domain, if you are writing in the morning, like informal things, etc. If you're writing in linguistics, if you're writing in more the educator, it is like, for example, letter to the parents. And so that, I think, is also, but when you are talking about a foreign language in English, that has been overshadowed by the so-called native speaker-based accuracy, and I don't like it. I don't know whether I maybe confused you, but I think this is not just accuracy in the pure so-called the institutional code, and that was my answer.
Okay, thank you. Questions next? Do you have any question? If you have any question, you can unmute yourself.
Sir,
Yeah.
I want to ask some question.
Yeah.
Okay. Like we know in Indonesia, if the institution have a native speaker teacher, the institution will be more famous than the institution have no English teacher, I mean native speaker. How about in Japan? It happened too, or
It is a problem. And then actually, I have my MA student who is doing that analyzing this course. This is a kind of dilemma. When we started, we decided not to advertise native speaker. We have teachers from many different countries, from many different first language. This is our way. And actually, we lost a lot of applicants. Although with this strong team, we are very proud of our program, and I think but it's been 10 years. In the beginning, I'm writing this kind of again, the ethnographic, auto-ethnographic things will be out next year. But yes, because of institutional discourse, and because of what they call the lack of information among the public, and then decline of the 18 years old population, we are still, enrollment is declining. And I don't know how much it is with the native speakers but I'm sure that many universities are still trying to advertise. And there was actually article by Tomoaki Morikawa, and I don't have a full reference here, who actually, which I didn't know until recently, compared Tamagawa strategy with the other totally different university, emphasizing native speakers, authentic American English. Then pedagogically, this author praised and our program. But yet, when you talk about enrollment data, we are losing. That was the problem. And now I'm in a more on the administration position, assistant president. So this is a dear dilemma that we need students. At the same time, as educator, as someone that who initiated self, I don't want to lose this identity. So this is a dilemma that I have to do. Yeah. This is yes, it is. My answer is yes, it is true. And this is something their profession has to deal with it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Next question. Rismar, you have any question?
Enough, sir. It's clear enough so far. Thank you, Mr. Masaki.
Yeah. Bu Is, do you have any question? Okay, Prof. Masaki, you mentioned about ELF awareness pedagogy. What is it? What is it for? What
Well, I
is
would say
it aimed at?
this is a umbrella term. Again, the Paul can answer this, but this is the umbrella term actually. But we are not thinning. My definition is not just what you can do in a particular one single lesson. Just more, this is more on the program development and teacher training, faculty develop, staff development that design the program so that you get enough information to deal. So in a way, like I said with the Bert and Sifakis' article, say you have to give enough information so that student and teacher can understand the reality of how English is used in the world first. And then, okay, what do you think about how it is different from what you had believed, the state of English? And then it's been very, very successful in the self and also my courses that students realize, oh, it's the first time, actually, but I think it's true. Okay, let's explore it. Now, here are teacher training. How would you do it? Okay. So that kind of things. So it's umbrella term that you design your own self, but important thing is awareness. Just going what's going on, how English is used in your life. Is it real? Is it talk about, like, for example, in 1980s, there was a lot of material, US-based material talking about the, like, for example, supermarket advertisement and buy one, get one free and how to buy hamburger, something like that. And that's not relevant. No, that's not relevant. Okay.
Okay, there is a question in the chat box. What do you think from Intan Pradita? What do you think about the intervention of artificial intelligence in the studies of ELF?
Yeah, I know. I say also maybe I think going to be a very, very popular topic for the next couple of years, and some people are exploring it. And this AI. Now, AI is like, for example, if you say the generative AI is a more like you, because you program it. And program means so really have to have categorize it in the beginning. Or say, I would say make AI aware of the real use of English by inputting more and more.
Yeah.
And kind of things. If AI is solely developing the so-called inner circle countries, and something AI become like this,
Yeah.
then going back to. But if you say put them like it's again, it's corpus is also another one. Now the Center for English as a Lingua Franca also the developing corpus database, which is the EFLJ. I think we have a Bill Dimowski and Tommy Kuroshima who is here and who are if you are interested, just go to our webpage. But again, even you do that in Indonesia, you do that in Philippines, something, and try to make the world aware there are a lot of this variation. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Another this comment from Winda Wulandari. When I was a child, my teacher said, "Speak English as close as native speakers to make your English perfect." Yeah, but it is not true. Yeah.
Yeah, this is actually what I said, and yes, I'm very glad you. But don't blame the teacher, because at the time, maybe teacher, as I said, teacher didn't have any information. Teacher had not been exposed to the different varieties of English. But I
Yeah.
think as far as you can give it to student, at least maybe it is okay if you are given the different varieties and different domains of English use, and then student have to choose so-called native speaker choice, and that I think is most convenient for them. I think I will say, okay, but the problem is many English teachers try to give a so-called the native speaker English as the only template. So that is a problem. So if you ended up teaching so-called American variety, whatever, that is okay.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, more question? I did a small survey last year about.
May I
Okay,
ask
yeah.
question?
Sure. Yes, please.
Okay.
Very smart. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Masaki Oda. Actually, it is not a question, just asking your opinion about this statement that says that there is some people say that AI can replace the position of English native speaker in learning English. Do you agree with this statement?
Many conference seem like this. I would say I cannot answer that question, but I would say whether or not that AI can make this is again all or nothing discussion, right? I think we really definitely need to collaborate with AI, make good use of AI, but don't make AI use us. But we need to find the best way. Like, for example, a couple of years ago, now this, I don't know, this is happening in Indonesia, a couple of years ago when this, like, maybe generative AI is one of them, but another one is the translation, like Google Translation or DeepL and those kind of things. And students use them. And some universities, and especially this is during the COVID era, and we had no time to check. So many universities were suffering whether they would allow this. And some universities see that using translation software was a criminal. I mean, it's academic dishonesty, and actually even made a rule to dismiss students. And whereas some universities, including our university, is we have to this is referencing things. So if we use unless teacher do not allow because of the nature of the class, then you really have to say if you have that you used the, for example, DeepL, maybe you really have to indicate it. Yeah. So that thing. So maybe this happens, but again, we really have to closely monitor the development. But anyway, AI can be friends. AI can be friends, but don't make AI what they called A-team, as the Tobias Knapkanga says. Hope I answered your question.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. What about the outer circle? Do you think that people in the second language environment speak English better than people in the foreign language environment?
I don't think you can generalize it. I mean, there are some, but for example, even it is very interesting in my case, like I'm in a foreign language environment. I still, after 30 years, I still feel more comfortable giving a presentation in linguistics in English. And so it depends on in what domain that you are, because a lot of the terminology, something is in English. And I have my daughter who is in Korea right now. And it's very interesting that she has a Taiwanese roommate and she has a Ukrainian roommate. And what is the lingua franca? Maybe they first started English, they ended up talking in Korean. But when they talk about like computer something, they switch to English. So it's been a domain. So, but like you're talking about translingual situation, something. But there's no distinction. Maybe, as I said, this is like same as a debate of native speakers. Like if you are native speakers, or maybe if you have been in a second language situation, whether you had more experience in using English, longer experience using English in a certain domain, maybe it is an advantage. But yet, you cannot really generalize it. Like, for example, if you go to the Japanese train station, you have the advertisement of English language tutoring service for the children. Then I often see, and often say, I think you need to try, the train station at the Tamagawa University, and say, well, 2 years old is not too late to learn English. Then there's always a typical phrase saying, in Japan, we learn English for 10 years, but you cannot speak it. 2 years old, in America, 5 years old kids. But I don't think 5 years old kids can do the legal negotiation in English, whereas the adult, maybe if you are a lawyer do the legal negotiation, something like that. So that kind of thing. So this kind of public discourse, now this is what the professionals can input.
Okay, maybe this is the last question from Risnawati. To what extent do EFL teachers prioritize intelligibility and communication over a native speaker like proficiency in their teaching? Do we
I
need
would
to
say
prioritize?
Generally, yes. I mean, generally, yes means we need to aim, especially if you have a general English courses, yes. But if you have like academic specific ESP, for example, you really have to assess the need of a student. If you are doing the preparation for the study abroad to the particular, say, English-speaking country, you may need to prioritize in terms of the cultural information and language there. But if you have like general English courses there, maybe automatically I think it's safe to think that intelligibility should be the priority in general. I think the problem is like, okay, now I said, even you are talking about intelligibility, there's the atmosphere especially in the communicative language teaching say, well, whether this is communicative, whether this is intelligible means like, okay, maybe you were able to talk with intelligibility, the native speakers. But again, like I'm talking, I wish I could speak like, your local vernacular eventually, or even Bahasa Indonesia. But I ended up. But I think, still, I believe the ideal situation, after I retire, I will try to learn anyway Bahasa Indonesia as well. But this is a tentative English as a lingua franca, is English as a tentative lingua franca for everybody.
Okay.
So
maybe Paul, you want to say something as a director of SELF
Paul?
in Tamagawa now?
Thank you very much. Could I share with you some measures for
Oh.
teachers to consider?
Okay, yeah.
And I'm just finding it here. Sorry.
If Prof. Masaki Oda is the host.
I can read them to you or share them with you.
Okay.
Basil Bjorkman, in her 2013 book, said, consider changing speaking testing so that it is clear that non-native speaker accents are not a barrier to achievement of the highest grades. That's what we do at our centre.
Yeah.
Not only monologic, but also dialogic speech is tested because dialogic speech allows the assessment of a learner's ability to negotiate meaning and to communicate effectively by the use of appropriate strategies. It may not be the best use of time and effort to concentrate on the grammatical accuracy of structures which do not seem necessary for successful communication. And then Jagdish Kaur from Malaysia, who you probably know, has some other measures for teachers to consider. She says, select lexical items that are precise and exact in conveying meaning in a given context. This is for teachers to focus on students to do this. Modify and adjust speech through, for example, lexical replacements and insertions to increase the clarity of what they say. Closely monitor the unfolding talk for signs of difficulty in understanding that can take the form of lengthy pauses, inappropriate responses, lack of uptake, muted minimal responses, etc. And finally, repeat, paraphrase, and ask direct questions in contexts where mutual understanding is under threat.
Okay. Yeah, that is from Tamagawa University. I think we are running out of time. Thank you very much, Prof. Masaki Oda. Do you want to say something to close the session?
In the chat, I just pasted the the forum, which is our journals, and it's open access journal, and feel free to download it. And then there are some of the practices that my colleagues have been doing, and it's been 10 years, and it's been great cumulative. It's a kind of cumulative knowledge, but it would be interesting if you have something relevant and contact our colleagues over there, and also we can just collaborate something. And thank you very much, Safnel.
Thank you very much. The journal published in 2 languages, in Japanese and English?
Yeah, it's mostly in English.
In English, okay. Okay, thank you very much. That's all we have time for this afternoon. Thank you very much, Paul, and other teachers, students, lecturers from Bengkulu University. And let's give a warm applause for Mr. Masaki Oda and Paul.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, see you soon in another occasion. Yeah. Okay.
Hope
Bye
to
bye.
visit your campus again.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sometime. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Arigato.
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 Terima kasih.
Absolutely.